Everyone's saying you've become heartless, but no one talks about how much you had to harden yourself just to survive. You're not acting different. You're just done explaining your pain to people who never listened in the first place. Everyone's whispering behind your back, but their noise can't reach the peace you've built inside your silence. You've changed because love disappointed you, and now your trust comes with boundaries instead of blind hope. Everyone's saying you're cold, but they forget how many times warmth was mistaken for weakness. You're acting different because you finally stopped chasing what was never meant to stay. Everyone's confused, but you're not. You just decided to stop betraying your own soul to fit in. They say you're not yourself anymore, but what if this is the first time you actually are? Everyone's talking like they know your story, but they didn't witness the nights that carved strength into your bones. You've changed, yes, because the person you were couldn't survive the storm that shaped you. They say you've become distant, but solitude became your safest home after people turned their backs. Everyone's wondering what happened, but some transformations don't need explanations, only peace. You're not acting different. You're finally at peace, and peace often looks like distance to the restless. They keep saying you've changed, but maybe you just grew tired of giving your energy to empty souls. Everyone's surprised by your silence, but silence is the loudest scream of a healed heart. You're not cold, you're cautious. You learned that not everyone deserves the warmth of your heart. Everyone's calling you mysterious now, but that's because your silence no longer feeds their gossip. You've changed because you stopped needing validation from people who never valued your truth. Everyone says you're different, but isn't that what healing looks like? Unfamiliar, but necessary. They call you unrecognizable, but the truth is, you've finally recognized yourself. Everyone's wondering where the old you went, not realizing you buried that version to save your sanity. You're not acting like someone else. You just finally learned to love yourself enough to walk away. Everyone's shocked by your glow, but they never saw how much darkness it took to find your own light. They say you're colder now, but maybe you just learned to control your fire. Everyone's calling you detached, but you've simply become selective with your peace. You've changed because heartbreak taught you that love without boundaries isn't love at all. Everyone's saying you're acting different. You are, because you've finally started healing differently too. They think you're lost, but you're just no longer walking where they expect you to go. Everyone's saying you've turned quiet, but that's what happens when noise no longer amuses your soul. You're not different, you're evolved, and evolution always makes the old world uncomfortable. Everyone's gossiping about your attitude, but you've just started defending your peace like it's sacred. They say you've changed, but change was the only way to stop bleeding from old wounds. Everyone's saying you're unpredictable, but freedom was never meant to be understood by the controlled. You're not colder, you just stopped offering warmth to those who took it for granted. Everyone's trying to figure you out, not realizing you stopped being a puzzle for people who don't deserve the answer. They say you act like you don't care anymore, and they're right. Indifference is what peace feels like after chaos. Everyone's saying you've become serious, but that's what happens when laughter once cost you too much pain. You're not acting different. You've simply stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that never respected your soul. Everyone's noticing you're calm, but calmness is what grows. After the storm breaks everything false inside you. They say you've changed. You did. You stopped giving energy to those who never gave effort. Everyone's uncomfortable with your stillness, but that's because they thrive on noise. You don't anymore. You're not acting strange. You're just done explaining your heart to people who listen only to respond. Everyone's saying you've lost your spark, but you simply stopped burning for people who never warmed your soul. They think you've become prideful, but really, you've just discovered your worth. Everyone's calling you distant, but peace always builds walls where chaos once lived. You're acting different because your heart finally stopped begging for temporary love. Everyone's shocked by your strength, but they'll never know how much breaking it took to find it. They say you've changed, but sometimes you must become unrecognizable to finally heal. Everyone's saying you're closed off now, but some doors had to be locked to keep your spirit safe. Everyone's been whispering that you've changed, but maybe they never paid enough attention to see who you really were before. They say you act like someone else now, but I think this is the version of you that finally stopped pretending. Everyone's talking about how different you've become, but I see someone who finally decided to stop breaking for people who never cared. They keep saying you've changed, but what they don't realize is pain will always evolve a person. You're not acting different. You're finally free from the need to please everyone. That scares them more than it scares you. Everyone's calling you unrecognizable, but maybe they just never saw the real you beneath all the masks. You used to be soft with everyone. Now you protect your peace, and they call that change. Funny how that works. They're saying you're different lately, but growth always looks strange to those who stay the same. Everyone's pointing fingers, but none of them survived what you did. Of course you're different. You had to be. You're not acting like someone else. You just stopped being the version of yourself that kept quiet while breaking inside. Everyone's noticing your silence now. What they don't know is silence is your new form of peace. They think you're cold now, but maybe you just learned to give warmth only to those who can handle it. People keep asking, "What happened to you?" But how do you explain that healing changes everything, even your energy? You're not the same anymore, and that's exactly how it was supposed to be. Pain demanded your evolution. Everyone says you're distant, but distance is how you finally learned to breathe again. You act different because you stopped apologizing for the fire that keeps you alive. They're saying you've changed, but I call it becoming real. The kind of real that no longer fits in fake conversations. People hate your glow up because it came from surviving what they couldn't. Everyone's gossiping about your new energy, but none of them saw you in tears when you decided to rebuild yourself. You're not different. You're just finally respecting your own boundaries. That's terrifying for people who crossed them. Everyone's shocked, but healing always looks like rebellion to those who loved your brokenness. They say you act like a stranger, but that's because you no longer shrink to make others comfortable. Everyone's wondering what happened, but peace is what happened. You stopped chasing chaos disguised as love. You're acting different because your soul got tired of pretending to be okay. They think you've lost your spark, but truth is, you've turned it into a fire no one can put out. Everyone's talking about how you've changed, but they weren't there when you begged life to change you. You're acting different because the pain taught you lessons no one else will ever understand. People notice your distance, but they don't know that protecting your energy became survival. Everyone's saying you're colder now, but they don't realize warmth costs too much to waste anymore. You've changed, not because you wanted to, but because you had to evolve or drown. They think you're being dramatic, but this version of you had to die a few times to finally feel alive. Everyone's uncomfortable with your peace because your calm exposes their chaos. You're not acting like someone new. You just stopped being who trauma built. People miss the old you, but that version didn't know how to say no. Everyone's saying you're different now. But isn't that what healing was supposed to do? They think you're fake, but it's just that authenticity feels foreign to people who live in denial. You've become quiet because silence protects what words can't defend anymore. Everyone's confused, but not everyone deserves to understand your transformation. They're saying you changed, and you did. You became someone who finally loves themselves. People call you distant, but peace always requires space. You're not acting different. You're acting healed, and that's rare. Everyone's wondering what broke you, but it's not about breaking anymore. It's about rebuilding. You've changed because pain refined you into someone you actually respect. They can't handle your calm because it means they can no longer control your chaos. Everyone's talking, but they don't realize you stopped needing their approval months ago. You're not distant, you're focused. There's a difference between being cold and being at peace. Everyone says you're not the same. They're right. You finally became who you were meant to be. They think you're different now, but truth is, you've just outgrown the shallow version of connection. Everyone's noticing your glow, not realizing it came from the ashes they left you in. You act different because you're no longer performing for their comfort. They say you've changed, but it's just that your soul stopped accepting crumbs.